Dude, with game prices constantly going up these days, choosing what to buy carefully has become essential, both to save money and time. And what's most interesting is that many new releases don't even show a big graphical difference compared to games that came out 10 years ago. So I've put together a list of older games that completely humiliate many modern titles, both in graphics and optimization, without relying on those crutch technologies like fake FPS and upscaling that have become the standard today. You can trust it. Any game on this list is a safe buy.
Splinter Cell Blacklist. It's infuriating to look at Splinter Cell Blacklist, a game from 2013, and realize that its dynamic lighting still puts many so-called next-gen titles released today costing $70 to shame. Ubisoft Toronto delivered a level of visual fidelity where shadows are not just aesthetic, they are the core gameplay mechanic. The way light reacts to the fabric of Sam Fisher's suit and how dust particles float through the beams of enemy flashlights creates a sense of depth that many modern graphics engines, packed with automatic features, simply can't replicate with the same natural feel. The level of environmental detail, from cold military bases to open markets in the Middle East, shows a handcrafted care in the textures that today has been replaced by post-processing filters trying to hide a lack of polish. Not to mention the optimization. The game runs smoothly with an image sharpness that humiliates recent releases that look like a smeared painting if you don't enable upscaling. It's a game that respects your hardware and delivers a visual fidelity that, even today, makes you stop and admire the tactical details of every environment.
I almost forgot. Joe called.
Mafia 2. If you want to see an example of how attention to detail and physics can humiliate any soulless modern graphics, just boot up Mafia 2. Released in 2010, this game delivered a level of environmental interaction that most current open worlds have abandoned out of sheer laziness. The way snow accumulates on cars and on Vito's clothes, and how the ice melts as the seasons change throughout the story is something I rarely see done with such care nowadays. The nighttime lighting of Empire Bay with neon signs reflecting in puddles and the shine of metal on classic cars creates a film noir atmosphere that is visually superior to many current games that call themselves realistic. The destruction physics during shootouts, with chunks of concrete flying and glass shattering in a believable way, give weight to the action that modern graphics engines seem to have forgotten how to deliver. It proves that visual immersion doesn't come from absurd resolutions, but from how the world reacts to your presence. And in that regard, Mafia 2 remains a beast that puts contemporary releases to shame. Mirror's Edge. This game is a miracle of art direction and engineering that came out in 2008, and if you told me it was released last week, I'd believe you. DICE used a lighting technique called Beast that calculated light bounce so accurately that the city of glass feels alive and tangible. The use of primary colors against the blinding white of the buildings creates a contrast that is not only beautiful, but extremely sharp. While today's games are increasingly dirty, loaded with cinematic film grain effects and excessive motion blur to hide flaws, Mirror's Edge delivers a clean, clear, and vibrant image. The way sunlight reflects off metallic surfaces and the detail in Faith's hands and feet as she runs bring a sensory realism that few modern parkour games have even managed to scratch. It is the definitive proof that a strong aesthetic vision combined with well-applied lighting technology is worth more than any cutting-edge graphics card running a poorly optimized and visually generic game. The Division. We need to seriously talk about what Ubisoft Massive accomplished with New York in The Division. Even after the supposed downgrade that became controversial at the time, the final game delivered a density of urban detail that I still haven't seen surpassed. The way snow falls and dynamically accumulates on cars, garbage bags, and your agent's gear is a technical spectacle. The volumetric lighting during snowstorms, where the lights from sirens and street lamps realistically scatter through the environment, creates an atmosphere of desolation that is almost palpable. Every alley, every abandoned apartment interior is filled with an amount of objects and textures that show a level of polish that today's games, with their enormous and empty maps, simply can't maintain. The glass and tire destruction system is so meticulous that it makes shootouts feel like scenes from big-budget movies. It's a 2016 game that puts today's releases to shame because it doesn't cut corners on detail. It delivers a city that truly feels evacuated, with a visual fidelity that sustains immersion for hundreds of hours.
Ryse, Son of Rome. This game was released in 2013 as a launch title for the Xbox One, and if you run it today in 4K, you'll go into a state of total denial. It's impossible to look at the level of detail in the Roman armor and not feel like we've been fooled over the last 10 years. Crytek used CryEngine to render metals, leathers, and fabrics with a fidelity that I rarely see in current AAA productions. Every plate of Marius Titus's armor reflects the environment accurately, and the red capes of the soldiers react to the wind with cloth physics that many modern RPGs in 2026 simply pretend don't exist. The scale of the battles, with hundreds of soldiers on screen while maintaining this level of fidelity, is a technical miracle, but what truly humiliates today's releases is the global illumination. When you walk through the damp forests of Britannia, the light filtering through the treetops and reflecting off the mud and blood on the ground creates a volume that is almost tactile. There's no upscaling here to save the frame rate. This is real optimization and a graphics engine built to be elite. It doesn't rely on cinematic blurs to hide ugly textures. It puts the detail front and center and proves that more than a decade ago, we had already reached a visual ceiling that the current industry seems too lazy to even try to touch.
The Order 1886. The Order 1886 is not just a game, it is a technical testament that Ready at Dawn left for posterity. The Victorian steampunk aesthetic here is treated with a level of obsession that borders on madness. What makes this game humiliate modern graphics is its material pipeline. The way the metal of the weapons gleams under London's low light and how the character's skin reacts to indirect lighting is something modern ray tracing tries to replicate but often fails to make feel as organic. They use the lighting technique focused on cinematic depth of field, creating an image that looks like a 35mm film in motion. The cloth physics and facial animations during shootouts are so fluid that the transition between cutscenes and gameplay is practically non-existent. While today's games struggle to maintain 60 FPS with an image full of fake FPS artifacts, The Order delivers a sharpness and image stability that make any 2024 or 2025 release look like an unfinished sketch. It's a game that understands that atmosphere is built in the detail of the texture of a wet brick wall or in the reflection of a flashlight on the asphalt. It humiliates modernity because it doesn't accept good enough. It pursued photorealistic perfection and reached a level that continues to be the industry's benchmark for visual fidelity. Dying Light. In 2015, Techland delivered in Dying Light a dynamic global illumination system that many current open-world games simply can't replicate without choking the hardware. The game's day-night cycle doesn't just change the color of the sky, it completely alters the perception of the environment's volume. Watching the sunset in Haran with sunlight rays cutting through the city's dust and smog creates long, detailed shadows that give an absurd sense of depth to every building and slum.
The density of objects and the vegetation swaying in the wind show a care for the world's grime that brings a realism that today has been replaced by clean, sterile environments. But where it truly humiliates is in its particle and physics systems. When you hit a zombie with a metal pipe, the model's reaction, the blood splattering on the ground, and the spark particles are rendered with a clarity that modern upscaling often turns into a blur. It's a game that runs excellently and proves that you don't need assistive technologies if your graphics engine is well built. Looking at Harran's horizon from the top of a light pole and seeing the city stretch out with that level of technical fidelity is a reminder that true optimization is what really makes visuals timeless.
Metro Last Light. What 4A Games did with Metro Last Light in 2013 is an affront to today's standards. This game was one of the pioneers in the use of tessellation and heavy volumetric lighting, and the result is an atmosphere that is physically oppressive. The way smoke spreads through the metro tunnels and reacts to the beam of your flashlight is superior to many particle effects we see in so-called next-generation games. The level of mechanical detail in the weapons, with every gear and screw visible and reflecting the environment, shows a dedication that modern studios seem to have lost in favor of generic models. On the surface of Moscow, the distortion effects on the gas mask, the ice building up on the glass, and the global illumination reflecting off the snow create a layer of visual fidelity that is frightening. It humiliates modern graphics because it isn't afraid to be heavy to deliver a crystal clear image. It doesn't use temporal solutions that leave trails on the screen or ghosting on moving objects. It delivers pure pixels and shadows with real edges. It's a game that treats every lamp and every shadow as a fundamental piece of visual storytelling, proving that hardware from 10 years ago, when properly used, was already capable of delivering a realism that today's industry often can only promise in cinematic trailers.
Alien Isolation. Released in 2014, Alien Isolation is possibly the greatest triumph of art direction and technical fidelity in the history of survival horror. Creative Assembly didn't just make a beautiful game, they created a lighting and material rendering technology that perfectly simulates the analog aesthetic of the 1979 film. What humiliates modern games here is the masterful use of volumetric shadows and the smoke and particle systems. Instead of relying on heavy ray tracing that drains all your hardware, the game uses ambient occlusion techniques and screen space reflections so polished that they make the corridors of Sevastopol feel real and tangible. Every metallic surface, every CRT monitor with electrostatic interference, and every drop of condensation running down the ventilation ducts is rendered with a sharpness that modern upscaling often turns into a blur. The way your flashlight's beam reflects off plastic and metal surfaces, creating a realistic diffuse glow, is something many games in 2026 still can't replicate without looking artificial. It's a title that runs flawlessly, proving that absolute visual immersion comes from technical mastery over light and contrast, not from artificially inflated resolutions powered by crutch technologies.
Far Cry 4. Many people forget the technological leap that Far Cry 4 represented in 2014, but just looking at the mountains of Kyrat is enough to realize that Ubisoft reached a level of environmental rendering that today seems to have been abandoned. What makes this game humiliate current releases is its dense vegetation combined with an extremely robust global illumination system. The tree tessellation technique used here gives every tree and shrub real volume, reacting to wind and sunlight in a way you don't see in many of today's generic open worlds, which rely on flat, static models to save processing power. The rendering of animal fur, the famous fur tech, is another aspect that puts modern games to shame. You can see individual strands of hair reacting to light and movement, something most current games simplify into blurred textures.
The draw distance without loss of detail is impressive, allowing you to see kilometers of forests and valleys with crystal clear clarity, without relying on distance fog or post-processing tricks to hide texture streaming. It's proof that an open world can be vast and still maintain a microscopic level of detail when there's real optimization behind it.
Max Payne 3. This game is the definitive example that physics and animations are just as important as polygons when it comes to creating impactful visuals. In 2012, Rockstar delivered in Max Payne 3 a level of interaction that modern shooters have simply given up on trying to achieve. The way Max physically interacts with every inch of the environment is surreal. If you dive toward a wall, he reaches out to brace himself, and the animation adapts procedurally to the impact. What humiliates today's graphics is the systemic fidelity. Bloodstains shirts in a realistic way, bullet holes remain in the environment, and every shot carries a weight that you feel through the visuals. The particle and smoke system is so dense that shootouts and enclosed spaces quickly turn into a visual chaos of dust and debris, all rendered with a sharpness that today's fake FPS would destroy with motion artifacts. It's a game that doesn't use filters to look cinematic. It uses cutting-edge animation engineering and physics to ensure that every frame of action is visually perfect and physically coherent. It's sad to see that after 14 years, few studios have the courage to devote so much technical effort to details that give so much soul to gameplay. Quantum Break. Remedy has always been at the technological forefront, but Quantum Break is its most ambitious project in terms of visual distortion effects. Released in 2016, the game implemented a global illumination and reflection system that was years ahead of its time. What makes this title humiliate modernity is how it handles the breaking of reality. When time stops, the environment shatters into thousands of fragments of glass and light that dynamically react to one another. The use of volumetric lighting and the level of detail in the actors' faces, captured with a precision that still goes head-to-head with today's elite motion capture, create an experience that blends cinema and gameplay in an organic way. While current titles often look washed out due to the excessive use of TAA, temporal anti-aliasing, to hide flaws, Quantum Break offers a material solidity where you can almost feel the texture of metal and concrete. The way light particle effects behave during combat creates a dense, heavy visual spectacle that proves that with solid rendering technology, you don't need upscaling tricks to sell an image that feels like it came straight from the future. LA Noir. Originally released in 2011, LA Noir delivered something the industry, bizarrely, seems to have stopped pursuing with the same intensity: the human soul through motion scan technology. What humiliates modern graphics here isn't the polygon count of the sidewalks, but the absolute fidelity of facial expressions. While today's games rely on procedural animations that often leave characters with dead eyes, in LA Noir, you can read a micro movement of the lip or a slight shift of the gaze that gives away a lie. It's a technology that captured every wrinkle, every tremor, and every nuance of the actors' performances so rawly that the transition between reality and digital is almost non-existent. The lighting of 1947 Los Angeles, with the classic California sunlight reflecting off car chrome, creates a period atmosphere that is visually superior to many generic open worlds released recently. It doesn't need ray tracing to convince you that its world is real. It uses contrast, shadow, and human performance to create an immersion that today's filter-heavy, upscaling-reliant technology often fails to deliver with the same sincerity.
You tell me that Celine is... Take a seat, Mr. Henry. We're gonna have a look.
Mad Max.
The Mad Max game, released in 2015 by Avalanche Studios, is a masterclass in how optimization and art direction can create some of the most impactful visuals of the decade. The desert here isn't just sand, it's a complex visual ecosystem. What makes this game humiliate current releases is its particle system and volumetric lighting. When a sandstorm approaches, the level of detail in the flying debris, the lightning tearing through the orange sky, and the way light is filtered through the dust is something that leaves any next-generation game looking embarrassing. The rendering of rusted metal and the heat distorting the air above the magnum opus's hood show a care for materials that today has been replaced by flat, lifeless textures. And most impressive of all, the game runs with absurd smoothness, delivering a crystal clear image without the trails and smears caused by the upscaling techniques that have become the current standard. It's a game that gives you a clean horizon, where you can see from miles, with a sharpness that proves that if you know how to work with light and particles, you don't need technological crutches to create a truly breathtaking visual spectacle. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. Closing the list with the king of RPGs, The Witcher 3 is a visual monument released in 2015 that to this day defines what an immersive open world truly is. What humiliates modern graphics here is the world's organic density. The way vegetation, trees, grasses, and shrubs, reacts violently or gently to the wind, combined with a weather system that drastically alters global illumination, creates an atmosphere that feels alive. While many current games feel static or artificial, the continent breathes realism through material textures like leather, chainmail, and wood, all featuring a microscopic level of detail. The water rendering technique and the reflections of the sunset in the swamps of Valen are lessons in aesthetics that many 2026 titles try to imitate without success. It's a game built to be dense and detailed in every millimeter, without relying on image reconstruction technologies that sacrifice clarity. It proves that visual longevity comes from the passion poured into every texture and from an understanding of how nature behaves, resulting in visuals that remain the benchmark by which all other open-world games are measured.
Looking at this list is a painful reminder that we had already reached a level of technical and visual excellence long before assistive technologies took over the market. These 15 games prove that when there is real optimization, inspired art direction, and deep mastery of the hardware, the result is visuals that don't age, they mature, and continue to humiliate those who try to take shortcuts. But now, I want to know your honest opinion. Which of these games have you installed recently and were shocked by how it still looks better than the games released this year? Is there any other old-timer that you think completely outclasses modern graphics? Drop it in the comments. Let's give credit to those who truly put in the hard technical work on these games.